Okay, in chapter 5 of First Corinthians, Paul sort of shifts gear just a little bit. In the first 4 chapters, he talks more about divisions in the church and that sort of thing. And now he's going to talk about sexual immorality. So again, the overarching theme of this letter is that the church in Corinth was pretty dysfunctional, and Paul was trying to teach them what we call foundations truth number 2, that we should live to honor God as Christians. And so he really drives this home in this passage. He says, I can hardly believe the report about the sexual immorality going on among you, something that even pagans don't do. And so here's the specific situation. He says, I'm told that a man in your church is living in sin with his stepmother, and you are so proud of yourselves, but you should be mourning in sorrow and shame, and you should remove this man from your fellowship. So there was sexual immorality going on, even more so than what the pagans of their day would have said was okay. And it was happening right there in the church. And so we see how dysfunctional this church was becoming. And so you can read what he says about that. He says you should get rid of them. This is bad. This is wrong. He says in verse 9, when I wrote to you before, I told you not to associate with people who indulge in sexual sin. But I wasn't talking about unbelievers who do it, or the greedy, or the ones who are greedy or cheat people or worship idols. He said you would have to leave this world to avoid people like that. And look what he says. He says in verse 11, I meant that you are not to associate with anyone who claims to be a believer, yet indulges in sexual sin, or is greedy, or worships idols, or is abusive, or is a drunkard, or cheats people. Don't even eat with such people. And so pay attention to what Paul's saying here. This is important because, again, in the context of what we would call foundations truth number 2, what Paul is saying is, as Christians, we should live to honor God, right? So Christians should live a different kind of life. And so when something that is just so black and white and is so clearly against God's word, like obvious, blatant sexual immorality, obvious greed, obvious abuse, drunkenness. And again, the implication is here that these are people that don't really care what God's word has to say. They say, no, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want to do. Paul says this about those people. Don't eat with those people. Don't consider those people Christians. If someone truly has that attitude that says, I'm going to live my life how I want to live my life, an attitude that is not at all submitted to God, what Paul is saying is, don't fellowship with those people. He's not saying that, for non-believers who act like that, you should cut yourself off from them, because obviously you can't. Everyone lives like that in the world, or a lot of people do. But Paul says this, if they say that they're Christians, then you should make sure that they act like Christians, and you should hold them to that. He says in verse 12, it's not my responsibility to judge outsiders, people who aren't Christians, but it is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning. Boy, those are some really hard words. And, for us today in our small groups and our families and our churches to say, well, what does this really mean for us today? And I'll leave that to you to really pray about and talk about and determine. But really, at least it should cause us to ask the question, am I really living my life to honor God? This doesn't go against truth 1, that we are saved by trusting Jesus, that we start a relationship with God by trusting Jesus. But it is to say that we should move on to honor God with our everyday lives. And this is what Paul is calling the Corinthians to in chapter 5. So go ahead and read that for yourself. Let the Spirit convince you of the truth and how to apply it today. And then we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 6.